Welcome back to Joy Recaps. Movies Stories Recapped here. Today, I'm going to recap an action horror film from 2019 called Escape Room. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The interior of a cozy, old-fashioned room is visible. Someone suddenly falls from the roof and runs toward a wall with a 10-number puzzle that requires a 4-digit code to solve. As he searches for clues, one of the walls begins to move toward him. He thinks he found it in a book, but then he collapses. He interprets the clue on 4 paintings in the room, but the wall is approaching. When the code he enters does not work, he panics even more, screaming that there is no way out. His thigh is crushed by the wall. Zoe can be seen walking to school 3 days earlier. When the professor brings up the quantum Zeno effect, she is in class. She has the answer written down in her notebook, but she is unable to raise her hand to answer. When the bell rings, the professor dismisses the class but summons Zoe to speak with her. He compliments her on her paper and attempts to help her come out of her shell by asking her to do one thing that scares her over the break. A motorcycle enters a business area, and we see Jason on the phone in his office, finalizing a business deal. His assistant informs him that he has another call, which Jason interprets as a client giving him a gift. He's correct, and he's happy about it. When Ben's boss walks in, he is labeling groceries in the back of a store. He approaches him about a new job opportunity, but he declines. His boss advises him to stop drinking if he wants to advance in his career. Back at Jason's office, a gift arrives in the form of a black box that appears to be difficult to open. Jason believes it was sent to him by his client. Zoe returns to her room and speaks with her roommate, who is unimpressed with her nerdy rant and leaves. She's nervous and trying to relax when she notices her mirror shaking. She feels like she's in an airplane when she awakens from a nightmare, her roommate asking if she's okay. Before Zoe's roommate leaves for the holidays, she discovers a package addressed to her in front of their room and gives it to her, claiming it is from her professor. Her package also contains the same black box. When Ben arrives at work early, he notices one of the black boxes waiting for him. He tries to open it by hitting and throwing it, but it opens on its own and he continues the process. Meanwhile, Zoe tries to open the box and quickly figures it out. Jason is watching YouTube videos to help him open the box at the same time. When a piece of paper falls out of the box, the 3 of them have succeeded in opening it. It's a voucher for Amino's escape room, from which they can win $10,000 if they escape. The following day, Ben is smoking in front of the Minos building when a car parks behind him. Amanda walks out, and they have a brief conversation about smoking. She walks inside and hands the guard her ID and phone. He thanks her for her military service before she enters the elevator. Danny rushes into the elevator with her at the last minute. He pulls out a phone that he has snuck into the house. Amanda is the first to enter the waiting room, where Mike, Jason, and Zoe are already seated. She goes to the front desk, but the others tell her not to bother. Mike is ranting about a childhood pet with heterochromia as Danny walks in second. Jason and Danny argue about the scar on Jason's hand, and Amanda wonders if they know each other because she recognizes her. Ben is the last to arrive and greets everyone. Amanda becomes concerned after reading about a fire in the newspaper. Danny informs the others that he has previously visited 93 escape rooms. Jason teases him about it, but Mike tells Danny that his nephew is just like him and that he suggested he try the Minos room. Amanda claims that she is only there for the money. Danny explains how the rooms usually work, and Zoe wonders how the game begins. He informs her that they must wait for the game's master to transport them to the escape room. Ben gets up to smoke another cigarette, but when he touches the doorknob, it snaps off. Mike goes over to try to fix it, but Danny believes they've already entered the escape room. He approaches the door and notices the oven dial. He believes it's a combination lock and instructs everyone to look for clues. Everyone looks around the room. Zoe notices a mug with an airplane on it, and Amanda searches for the name Dr. Wooten Yu, thinking it might be a hint. Mike picks up a copy of Fahrenheit 451 and discovers a screwdriver inside. Zoe suspects that 451 is the combination to the lock and enters it into the door. Suddenly, the ceiling turns bright red. They notice that it is also emitting heat. Zoe tries to deactivate the dial, but it is stuck. Danny says they can ask for a hint, so Amanda goes to the reception desk. Jason comes across a globe with a boat, which throws him off for a moment, but then he notices the lock on the window. Ben intends to break the window with a fire extinguisher, but when he realizes it's a forgery, he throws it away. The 4 columns in the room begin to heat up as well. Everyone is terrified, except Danny and Zoe, who discover a key in the extinguisher. When she opens the window, they notice that the receptionist is a mannequin. The phone suddenly rings, and everyone expects Jason to answer. The message is automated and instructs them to follow the rules. When he hangs up the phone, the window shutters rise and additional heaters appear. Amanda is having an anxiety attack, so Zoe and Amanda go get some water. Zoe notices her neck burns. The men are looking for clues but are at a loss for what to do as the room heats up. Zoe notices another clue about the coasters on the table and rushes over to one of them, which opens an exit in the duct. The exit only partially opens, so they must all press the coasters at the same time to fully open it. Jason enters the duct and discovers a way out. He requires Mike's screwdriver, so Amanda switches places with him and lets him pass. Jason unlocks the other door, while holding the coasters with both hands. The others send Amanda through the vent next. Zoe has another thought about the puzzle. She fills a glass with water and presses it against the coaster. Meanwhile, Amanda is terrified as she crawls through the duct. She is having a flashback to her time in Afghanistan. Zoe hears Amanda scream and the others tell her to go after her. Danny and Ben fill the glasses with water, but they are only half full. They argue, and a burner falls in the room. Ben pours his liquor into the glass, and the door swings open. They flee in the final seconds as the room burns. They enter the next room by jumping through the fireplace. Danny is still excited because he believes it is all a game, but Amanda believes it is all real and wants to leave. Danny tries to persuade Amanda not to call the cops after Jason finds another lock. He continues to hand her the phone, but there is no signal. Meanwhile, Zoe and Jason are looking for clues, and he discovers the first key to one of the door's locks. Then he discovers the second lock on the door, which requires a 7-letter word to open. When Ben notices animal skulls on the wall, they all try to figure out what the words are. In a flashback, he is driving drunk with his friends and singing Christmas songs. He advises the others to try Rudolph, and it works. Jason opens the door and they leave the house, but Zoe and Ben remain inside. When the two of them leave the house and the door closes behind them, the next room appears to be outside, and it is extremely cold. Danny hits his head on the room's walls, which are giant monitors. He slips on the ice, which appears to be cracking. Danny remains convinced that the room is secure. Freezing air begins to flow through the vents. He instructs the others to look for clues once more. Jason is the one who discovers the door. On a sled, Zoe notices the phrase "True North is a lie." Mike discovers a fishing rod on a tree at the same time that Ben attempts to light a cigarette. Amanda finds one coat and says they'll share it before giving it to Zoe. Danny says there might be a clue in the water if Ben falls into a fishing hole. Mike suddenly brings over the fishing rod. While the others are attempting to solve the puzzle, Zoe discovers a compass in her coat pocket. She follows it north, but then remembers what she read on the sled and turns around. As Ben walks away to smoke his cigarette away from them, Zoe discovers another clue in the mouth of a stuffed bear and returns to the group. Mike drops the clue, which is a magnet, inside again after Zoe attaches it to the fishing line. Jason requests the coat. Mike catches something on the rod, but it's quite heavy. They take out a frozen cube containing the key. Jason requests Ben's lighter and throws it at them, prompting Danny to retrieve it. He falls into the water and under the ice when he gets the lighter and turns around. The others notice him and try to break the ice in order to capture him. They eventually lose sight of him and he drowns. Jason hands Amanda the coat, telling her she was correct that the game is real. Mike and the others attack Ben, blaming him for Danny's death. They believe he is the game's master. He begins insulting all of them, but Jason stops him and tells them that survival is more important. Then he instructs them to use their body heat to extract the key from the ice. The temperature in the room falls. Jason sees himself on a boat with a friend wearing a red coat in a flashback. Mike passes out, but Jason retrieves the key. They discover the door, which opens behind them. The ice breaks as they approach it, and they rush inside at the last second. The next room contains a bar where everything is turned upside down. The room begins to rise, and when it does, the phone rings. Mike walks beneath the phone, which falls into his grasp. There is a deafening noise, followed by music. Jason notices the door to the other room, but it lacks a doorknob. Mike notices the missing 8-ball from the pool table and begins moving around looking for clues when the noise returns and Ben stops him from falling over because a piece of the floor has fallen off. Amanda scales the bar and discovers a lockbox containing 4 numbers. Zoe discovers a sliding puzzle on the opposite wall and climbs over the hole to get to it. Mike also climbs over to her side and assists her in getting up. As she works on the puzzle, another section of the floor collapses, almost taking Jason with it. Ben switches to the puzzle side, and Zoe finally solves it. They figure out how to read it and get a 4-digit code, but when Amanda enters it into the lockbox, it doesn't work. Another section of the floor collapses, and Mike and Ben grab hold of the puzzle, but they're too heavy for it, and it begins to tip over. Mike is too scared to climb down, so Zoe does it and falls to the ground, hitting her head. They all call for her to get up, but she has a flashback to an airplane accident in which she was calling to her mother. Jason wakes her up and repositions her on the wall. Zoe instructs Amanda to try the code in reverse, which she does, and it works. Inside the lockbox, she discovers the doorknob. Another section of the floor collapses. Amanda leaps over to the pool table in an attempt to reach the other side, but she drops the knob on the last section of the floor. As she falls, the noise resumes, so she throws the knob to Jason and grabs the phone, swinging over the hole. She stumbles and falls. Mike follows Jason as he opens the door. Ben coaxes Zoe into the other room and stays with her to calm her down. The next room appears to be a hospital. They all start going through it when they notice that all of the hospital beds look familiar. They slept in those beds while in the hospital. Zoe examines one of the other beds and discovers that it belongs to Amanda. In an explosion, she was the only survivor. Zoe also tells her own story. She was the only person to survive a plane crash. Jason was the only one who survived a boating accident. His story goes that his friend went insane from hypothermia and swam away. Ben reveals that he, too, was the sole survivor of a car accident, and Mike was the sole survivor of a mining accident. As he tells them that his brother died in the mine accident, he has a flashback to the mine. They begin to connect all of their mishaps to everything in the rooms. Danny's documents are discovered by Zoe. He was also the sole survivor of an accident. She believes the game is one of survival, with the goal of determining who is the luckiest of the lucky. The TV starts playing and displays a countdown to exiting the room. The three men begin looking for ways to leave the room. They discover X-rays as clues, which Ben deduces are actually sign language and indicate an EKG. Zoe begins smashing the cameras, believing that if they continue to watch them, the group will be unable to win. Jason discovers the poison that will be released in the room when the countdown ends, and then discovers the EKG machine, which states that the correct heartbeat will open the doors. He first tries with Ben's heart rate, but when that fails, he convinces Mike to try it as well. His heart rate is elevated, but not sufficiently elevated. Jason wants to shock him to raise his heart rate and convinces him to do so as well. He raises his heart rate, but ultimately kills him. Ben is attempting to revive Mike as the poison begins to fill the room and Zoe continues to break the cameras. Jason straps the EKG to himself and lowers his heart rate to a safe level. The door swings open. Jason goes out, but Zoe refuses to accompany him. The door closes as Ben follows Jason out through the vents. Zoe is choking and crawling for an oxygen mask. Jason and Ben enter the other room and begin arguing. Ben accuses him of murdering not only Mike but also his friend on the boat. Jason tells him that survival is a choice and continues to look for clues, eventually discovering a hatch. They both grab the hatch and pull it open. They suddenly begin hallucinating. The poison was on the handle, and the puzzle on the hatch instructs them to find an antidote. Ben discovers the antidote, but there is only one dose available. Jason leaps over him, and they fight for it. Ben kills Jason and then injects himself with the antidote. Ben dashes into the adjacent room. It's the one from the beginning of the movie. Meanwhile, the cleaning crew enters the hospital room and believes they have discovered two bodies. They discover the oxygen mask hanging from the ceiling when Zoe awakens and knocks them both over. She takes one of them's guns and flees the room. Ben is in the other room at the same time, having messed up the code. He escapes the room by jumping into the fireplace as the wall closes in around him. When he walks inside, he hears a disembodied voice tell him that his money is on Jason. The game's master appears and informs him that he has won. Ben antagonizes him, but then begins explaining the point of the game. Customers of the game are the world's most powerful people, and they want entertainment with real stakes. As he hands Ben a cigarette, the man tells him that he didn't think he could win. Then he tries to kill him, but Ben unexpectedly stabs him with the piece of wood that had become lodged in his leg. The monitor shows that Zoe and the man are still in the game, so she comes out and shoots at him. The man tackles her and nearly kills her before Ben knocks him down and shoots him. They both walk out of the building. Ben is in the hospital the next day and is doing well. Zoe can be seen sitting beside him. A detective enters the room and invites her to accompany him. He leads her to the Minos building, which is surrounded by police officers. Nothing of the rooms remains when they walk inside. Because they haven't found any evidence, the detective doesn't believe what she's telling him about the escape rooms. When she sees the words "No Way Out," she realizes it's an anagram for Dr. Wooten Yu. But the detective is unconcerned and tells her they must leave. Ben and Zoe are having coffee 6 months later. She shows him a file she's compiled about the rest of their group and how their deaths were staged to appear accidental. He tells her she needs to let it go, but she continues to explain what she's discovered about the game. Zoe had deciphered the logo and discovered that it represented the coordinates of a Manhattan building. She's even purchased plane tickets for the two of them. Ben doesn't agree with her plan, but he eventually agrees to go with her. A plane flies through the sky, one of its engines on fire. A stewardess searches for a clue and discovers it in a bag. The tool does not open the cockpit door, but instead takes you to another riddle. While the other two stewards are trying to figure it out, a third tells the passenger to brace for impact. The other two crack the code and enter the cockpit, only to find the pilots dead. The stewardess attempts to fly, but the plane crashes. Suddenly, two people appear, revealing that the plane crash was a simulation. A disembodied voice informs one of the simulation's participants that Zoe's and Ben's tickets were intercepted and that the game continues.